Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Thursday, May 23rd, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the latest film and TV news, and we're going to answer a question in the mailbag about our review writing process. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
Let's start things off with some serious news. Hollywood has been shooting a lot of projects in Georgia, and Georgia is changing their laws. The state is becoming anti-abortion, and that is causing some ruckus in the way Hollywood does business. Ben, tell us about it.
Yeah, so two projects have pulled out of planned productions that were supposed to take place in Georgia because of this anti-abortion legislation that's going through. Earlier this month, for those of you who don't know, the governor of Georgia signed what's called a heartbeat bill, or nicknamed a heartbeat bill, that effectively bans abortion after about 6 weeks or so. And this is an incredibly controversial thing. It's pretty much unconstitutional, and there's some theories that they know that it's unconstitutional, and they're trying to get it sent up to the Supreme Court to try to overturn Roe versus Wade. It's a whole long, complicated issue that probably is outside of the scope of a movie podcast, but it does actually have...
And you probably should have heard of the elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, so for a full breakdown of what all of that actually means, go elsewhere. But in terms of like what it means for Hollywood, this is interesting because these are the first two projects that have actually done something about, reacted in this way to this legislation. So Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar is a new movie that is supposed to be reuniting the Oscar-nominated Bridesmaids writers Kristen Wiig and Annie Mumolo. They're actually starring in this movie as well. This is a film that was supposed to be shooting in Georgia, and they have completely pulled the plug on that state. They're looking for somewhere else to shoot this now. The same thing goes with a TV show called The Power that's going to be on Amazon Prime. And this comes from director Reed Morano, who directed The Handmaid's Tale, the first, I think, 2 or 3 episodes. She won an Emmy for her work there. And as soon as the governor signed this bill, Morano in particular said, we have no problem stopping the entire process instantly. There's no way we would ever bring our money to that state by shooting there. And the abortion part of this conversation, really, I think it's probably all 3 of us are on the same page that, like, let women control their own bodies. I don't think that part is controversial among us, but I'm not sure where you guys stand on this, because Hollywood seems sort of split in terms of how to actually react to this, because there are some people who, like Reed Morano and like this movie production, are thinking that pulling out of the state completely is the best way to send a message. And then there are others who have decided to stay in Georgia and continue to film there, but they're going to, like J.J. Abrams and Jordan Peele, for example. They have a show on HBO called Lovecraft Country that is going to be filming there, and they are actually going to be donating 100% of their respective episodic fees for that season to the ACLU and an organization called Fair Fight Georgia. The 2 schools of thought are, one, if you pull out of your productions out of the state altogether, it sends a hardline message that we're not messing around here. And then the people on the other side of that, who are still trying to do some good in the world, are arguing that to pull your production completely out of the state actually hurts the people in Georgia more than it hurts the legislators, more than it hurts this minority group of people who have passed or are threatening to pass this law that actually takes place or goes into effect the beginning of January 1st of next year.
But on one hand, though, you're motivating those people of Georgia, the people that, on the ground that are going to be affected by this, to, rise up and try to do something about this.
Right. Yeah. But it's sort of like, in the meantime, it hurts people who are, in the film industry, who are living there, who are just, freelancing and jumping from job to job. Those job opportunities are going away because these productions are pulling out, and presumably more will follow. So it ultimately hurts the economy of the state, and it's sort of like it's a tough conversation to have, because there's no easy answer here. It's not like Yeah, it's complicated. Brad, do you have any thoughts on like the Brad, solve this for us now. What is the best way forward here?
I have a 15-point plan to solve. So it's really tough because it does suck that if you pull these productions out, a bunch of people are losing out on jobs and you're hurting the economy of these places. And there are a lot of good people who live, in states like Georgia and Alabama and stuff who are passing these laws. And so you can't paint with a real broad brush and be like, just to hell with these states entirely. But at the same time, you have to, figure out a way to send a message to, the people who are behind these despicable bills to do it. And the best way to do it is probably through, the broken system of democracy and trying to vote these assholes out of, their jobs. But it's a delicate line to walk. And I don't know. It's definitely going to be something that is difficult to play out here in the future.
Yeah, one thing really quickly before we move on that I feel like is probably inexcusable at this point is for a company like Disney, who has a huge interest in the state of Georgia, and they've filmed a lot of their productions there. Most of the Marvel movies are filmed in Pinewood, Atlanta, or just outside of Atlanta. Disney hasn't even made a statement about this yet. So, while you can argue about the intentions of people like J.J. Abrams and Jordan Peele, or on the other side, Reed Morano for pulling out here. At least they've taken a stand and let people know what their mindset is here. Disney, who's this massive, the biggest company in Hollywood, has just stayed silent on this, and I feel like that's a strange position to take for them.
I'll play devil's advocate here. Because I am Mr. Disney on this podcast. I would say that those two productions you're talking about had probably not locked down and have money invested in Georgia. It was easy probably for them, or not, I don't want to say easy, but it was easier for them to cut ties and move elsewhere. Whereas Disney probably has a multi-year deal in Pinewood, Atlanta, probably has money invested, has crew actually maybe even on retainer. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a more complicated situation.
I definitely agree that that's the case. But back in 2016, when an anti-LGBTQ bill was in danger of passing, Disney released a statement threatening to pull out of Georgia if that bill went through. And it ended up getting vetoed, so they didn't have to deal with it. But they at least made the point that they were not willing to, that they didn't agree with the decision that was potentially being made there, and they've stayed silent on this one, which is just strange to me. Okay,
then I'm done defending Iger. You gotta answer for this, Iger. We need an answer. No, I don't know. I hope they do something. Like Hollywood is traditionally very liberal, and I feel like we're all on the same page, as you said, with being against this anti-abortion law. And I feel like even though Hollywood is a business and can save money by going to Georgia, there's motivation to not film there. And I feel bad for all those, I have friends that are in Georgia in production jobs and stuff like that, and I feel bad for them. But I feel like that should be more motive to get, to rise up, get the,
as Brad said, vote these assholes out.
Yeah, exactly. Vote these assholes out. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about Rotten Tomatoes. Speaking of assholes, let's talk about Rotten Tomatoes and the trolls who have taken over the moviegoer rating over there. We saw that with Last Jedi. We've seen that with Captain Marvel. And Rotten Tomatoes is they've taken like over a year to respond to this. They finally come up with a plan to defend against these trolls. Brad, what is it?
Yeah, so they'd already taken some previous measures to try and prevent this before, when there was some review bombing of Captain Marvel and whatnot, but this is the most direct action they've taken as far as trying to truly put the kibosh on it. And basically what they're doing is they've made it so that you cannot submit a rating or review that contributes to the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes unless you can actually verify your ticket purchase through Rotten Tomatoes. Starting today, users that want to contribute a rating to the audience score will have to verify their ticket purchase through Fandango. Since Fandango owns Rotten Tomatoes, that'll be kind of an automatic thing since they'll have evidence of you actually buying your ticket. But eventually, later this year, theater chains, AMC Theaters, Regal, and Cinemark will also be participating by collaborating on some kind of ticket purchase authentication system with Rotten Tomatoes so that people who don't buy their tickets through Fandango can also participate and have their rating and review count towards what will be called the verified audience score. And that verified audience score will also be used not only on Rotten Tomatoes, but also on Fandango, which will be replacing their usual 5-star fan rating system.
Okay, so I guess my big question here is, like, what does this do, like, to films after they leave theaters? Like, there's been so many movies that became cult classic on DVD or VHS or whatnot, VOD, that people don't see in theaters. If I can't buy a ticket, I can't account to that fan rating score. Like, does that mean that it'll never change once it leaves theaters?
I mean, for now, yes, they don't have any system in place as far as how you'll be able to rate a movie if you see it as a home rental or if you happen to buy it on Blu-ray or something like that. I would imagine they'll probably wait and see how this plays out and how well it works before they start taking it up to that level. But my bet is that once the movies that are first being used with this new system, which are Aladdin, Booksmart, and Brightburn this weekend, once maybe those movies start coming to home video, they might have something else in place that would allow you to prove that you bought a digital download or rented the movie, maybe even through Fandango now, since they have their own direct-to-video service, or maybe a proof of purchase or barcode for a Blu-ray, something like that. Hopefully they'll be able to do that because I'm sure there's some people who don't see movies in theaters that would still like to provide a rating on Rotten Tomatoes for whatever reason. Yeah,
and this whole system is to combat people from creating multiple fake accounts and rating a film low. We've seen that with the movies I mentioned. Ben, do you think this is going to fix that problem?
It will certainly curb it, I think, because, at least until the trolls figure out some way around it, which I feel like is probably inevitable for anything like this, but I think it's the right move for Rotten Tomatoes to make, to make it as difficult as possible for these people to try to push their bizarre agendas on the world and trick my mom, who doesn't know anything about this, who might, glance at a rating and just take it at face value. So, I don't know. What do you think, Peter? Do you think that this is just putting a Band-Aid on the Hoover Dam?
Well, one thing's for sure, Hollywood is very upset over this, and Rotten Tomatoes is responding because, at the pressure of them. And this does seem like a Band-Aid to me. I'm cynical, and I'm thinking that eventually down the line, people are going to be able to submit like an image of their ticket stub. And these groups, they're very organized. They, whenever we post anything negative about Zack Snyder or we post something positive about Last Jedi, we tend to get an influx from the subreddits and stuff like that. These groups are very passionate, and it seems like there's going to be some kind of loophole to get through this ticket verification system somehow. Maybe once they expand from Fandango, I'm guessing there's going to be some way, and I'm sure these groups will take advantage of that. But, I applaud Rotten Tomatoes for trying.
Yeah. But here's the thing, like, how many people actually care about the audience rating of a movie that is no longer in theaters? Like, I just feel like, at that point, just pay attention to the critic rating and you'll have a general sense of what people think about it. I don't know. I mean, I'm somebody who never looks at any of that stuff at all, so maybe I'm just coming at it from a place of like...
What about a film like Kevin Smith's Mallrats, which I don't know how you fall on that, but, that film was kind of eviscerated critically when it hit theaters. Nobody really saw it. I'm assuming if there was an audience score back then, it was low, and it found a big following on DVD. And I feel like it would hurt a film like that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that's a good example, I think, of something that's like old enough where, if you haven't seen the movie yet, but you are aware that it has a cult following, then it doesn't matter what the rating, or it shouldn't matter what the rating is. If you're interested in that kind of thing and you're, participating in film conversations where people that you value are talking about, oh yeah, this movie is great for whatever reason, then just check it out for yourself, instead of like relying on this. I don't know. I guess just rating systems in general, I sort of bristle at, but
here's
maybe
the thing,
I'm
Ben.
an outlier. Yeah.
People don't have enough time. So you have to make a lot of choices about what you see and what you choose not to see. And I feel like those ratings help you choose.
That's true. I just, if that's the new world that we're living in, then the downside of that is that movies like Mallrats, for example, are just going to sort of probably fall by the wayside because there's such an influx of content, and it'll always be there. And, the people who want to find it will find it. And movies, every movie will always find its intended audience. It's just going to be a matter of time now that there's so many other things competing out there.
Okay, let's talk really briefly about Universal Studios Hollywood. They're changing the Jurassic Park ride into a Jurassic World ride, and today they've released some details on that. Ben, what do we know?
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So Chris Pratt, Bryce Dallas Howard, and B.D. Wong are reprising their roles from the movie in the ride. That is, one of the things that they led their press release with. I don't really care about that much.
And what does that mean? They're just going to be on like monitors, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I think they'll be on screens. Like if you've seen the Fast and Furious supercharged ride, then it's probably going to be a similar thing. Maybe they'll pop up in the actual ride itself on some screens, or as you in the queue area, they'll talk to you while you're waiting in line or something like that. We don't know exactly what they're going to be doing. It says that their characters, quote, will shed light on their interactions with the dinosaurs, whatever that means. So, but the most interesting thing to come from this is a bit of what seems to me to be new technology for a theme park, which is there is a Mosasaurus aquarium observatory section of this newly revamped ride. And the Mosasaurus is like the big underwater dinosaur that you saw in the most recent Jurassic World movie. And Universal's team collaborated with Industrial Light and Magic to create an area of the ride where you are on the ride vehicle, you're sort of floating through, and there are screens on the side where it looks like that Mosasaurus is going to, burst through the glass and attack you or something like that. But the interesting thing about this is that, according to the press release, it says the team also employed a series of lighting enhancements, allowing the aquarium to intuitively shift from day to night, as well as visual changes to the environment during inclement weather, thus creating a variety of visual scenarios guests can experience based on when they experience the ride. So it sounds like, if it's raining outside and you are at Universal Studios Hollywood, when you board the ride vehicle and go into the bowels of this ride, the screens that you're watching this Mosasaurus swim around on, it's going to appear as if it's raining outside on this completely fake digital story that they're telling you, basically, which is pretty cool. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
That's cool, but I wonder how many tourists are actually even going to notice that detail.
That is very true. I can't imagine many people will be like, wow, this is amazing. Especially, maybe if you ride it multiple times, you might be able to notice the difference there. But yeah.
I mean, I'm sure people will notice the difference between day and night because it'll be lit up differently there. But yeah, I think this is probably a first for the big theme parks. I can't think of a ride that does this kind of thing. I mean, I think Universal in Florida, when they opened Skull Island, there's a part of that ride that takes place outside the queue, and if it's raining, the ride vehicle will bypass that section of the ride. But I mean, that doesn't it changes the ride, but it doesn't change the
content of the ride.
Content of the ride. So
yeah,
so that's kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to see if other theme park rides employ that. We've been following the box office as the summer has been heating up. And we were all, I think, underestimating Men in Black International. I'm not sure if that was on any of our summer movie wager lists. Was it? I don't know.
No, I'm pretty sure we didn't. I know I didn't put it in my top 10 because I don't think it's going to do very well.
Yeah. Well, now we have box office tracking. Brad, were you smart in not putting it in your top 10?
I think so. As of now, the early tracking numbers for Men in Black International have it with an opening weekend of $40 million. So that's not a huge number for a blockbuster. It's certainly not a failure, but it is lower than what Men in Black 3 earned in its opening weekend a while back. So it seems like maybe it might not be as big of a hit as the studio is hoping, which is, maybe a disappointment because the budget of the movie is apparently around $110 million, and it'll probably make that back, but that's not including the ad campaign for the movie. I'm betting that some of them, the bigger numbers will come from international box office. Men in Black's a pretty well-known title. Chris Hemsworth is a huge star thanks to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even Tessa Thompson, since she's part of it as well. So there's a chance that the international box office could be better for a movie like this. So yeah, I feel like I think I'm secure in not putting this on my list.
Well, $40 million opening means that it's probably going to end the summer with like $100 to $120 million. Do you think that's enough to make the top 10 this year?
I doubt it.
And by the way, I just checked. I think Jermaine is the only person to put it in their top 10. Or no, I lied. Devindra also put it in the top 10. Devindra put it at number 8, and Jermaine put it at number 9.
I have it in my dark horses, which I feel like is a comfortable spot for it based on these numbers.
Yeah, it's also in my dark horses, so I feel good about that. Okay, let's move on to our last story for today, and that is about Todd McFarlane's Spawn movie, which it looks like, even though it has been casting, it might not happen. Ben, what do we know?
Well, yeah, the cast of this movie is in place right now. We know that Jamie Foxx and Jeremy Renner are signed on to star. The legendary Greg Nicotero, who did makeup for shows like The Walking Dead, is attached to do the makeup for this. But in a new interview with comicbook.com, Todd McFarlane, who is the guy who created the Spawn character. He's a famous comic writer. You probably have seen his name pop up here and there if you're listening to this podcast. He said, "The money's sitting on the sidelines ready to go. I just need to get everyone that wants to put money in to shake their heads to the same script. As you can imagine, everyone has a slightly different version of it in their head. You just go and try to appease a handful of people while not giving in to what it is that I'm trying to do myself. Because if I have to change it too much, I'll walk away from it all." So, to me, Todd McFarlane, this is supposed to be his directorial debut, his feature directorial debut. So he doesn't need this movie. He's not like an up and coming filmmaker who's trying to get a chance to move on into bigger and better things. He's the creator of this intellectual property, and
not just that. He's like a huge millionaire. Like, he owns like McFarlane Toys. Like he could retire now and be fine for the rest of his life, his kids' life, their kids' lives, and their kids' lives.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He has this successful toy company. He's like one of the most recognizable figures in comic book history, probably. So I think, it's not like he's hurting for cash, or at least the opportunity. He could be pulling some sort of like Donald Trump level scheme where he makes it seem like he has way more money than he actually has. But in any case, he's like the type of person that could easily find work elsewhere. It's not like he really needs this movie to happen. So the idea that, if the changes are being forced into a script that he doesn't like and he could just walk away, that seems like the best position to be in as a filmmaker. But I don't think this news is necessarily like a death sentence for this movie. It's just, this is the update right now. He thought that this was going to be in production probably by now. Because I remember him saying when this movie was first announced in 2017, like, it's coming, get ready, we're going into production. And like, it's been 2 years and that hasn't happened yet. But it seems like the script...
I'm honestly surprised he's not like self-financing this movie at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, he's convinced Blumhouse and Jason Blum, the producer there, that he's the guy to direct this movie. So they're in business with him, and it's just a matter of like getting everybody to sign off on the ideas that he has in the script. And once that happens, it sounds like they'll be good to go. But I guess there's always the chance that this could completely fall apart. But I don't know. I'm not looking forward to this movie personally because I've never had any investment in Spawn, and just hearing McFarlane talk about his vision for this film and how he's like proud of the fact that it's going to be a quote joyless movie, and like that that really earns its hard R rating, and it's just going to be this, dark and gritty, badass superhero movie. I'm like, we've seen that so many times. I'm not really interested in this, but I don't know. Do you have any history with Spawn? Are you interested in this movie at all?
I was a huge Spawn fan. I had the first issue. I went to the Nassau Coliseum, some comic convention back in the day, and I got Todd McFarlane to autograph my issue. But I don't think the story of Spawn is that interesting. He's one of those characters, kind of like Venom, who was, I think another character that McFarlane worked on, right? Who just looked really cool. Like, McFarlane knows how to make things look cool. If you can bring that to the big screen, I think it'll be good. But I feel like I'm gonna go see this when it hits theaters, and the same night that Gambit and The Crow reboot hits theaters. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like
what a triple feature that would be.
I feel like that weekend's never gonna come. Brad, what about you?
Yeah, when I was younger, I was into Spawn. I didn't really read the comics, but I just liked the art and I liked how cool Spawn looked, and I had some action figures, especially once the movie came out. And, since I was a dumb kid, I liked the movie, even though it's terrible. But yeah, at this point, I don't care about a new Spawn movie. Like Peter said, it's the same thing with the Crow. There's maybe like 5 people out there who want to see a new movie. And it's just going to keep being talked about forever and will never get made.
Okay, let's dive into the mailbag really quick. Gokul G from New Zealand writes in, he wants to know about our reviewing habits. He says, when you were writing a review, do you prefer to do it in silence, or do you have music, the TV running in the background? I prefer to write movie reviews for fun on my blog, and I find that I can really concentrate. I can't really concentrate if there's any music or sound in the background. And he says he's loving Chris's advice corner. Okay, I think, Brad, you've talked about in the past that you like working, you like writing with having like stuff you've seen playing in the background on the TV.
Yeah, if I'm working, writing an article or anything for Slash Film or whatnot, I usually have something on in the background, whether it's a TV show or a movie. It's definitely something that I've seen, so I don't have to pay attention to it. But if I want to take a glance at it, I can. I already know what's happening. I just like having the comfort of background noise. And every now and then I'll do music, but I feel like I don't concentrate as well with music for some reason. I think it's just because I have to pay more attention to like the playlist that's going. If there's a song that I don't want to hear, I have to skip it, whereas a TV show or a movie lasts longer and I can just keep it on for an extended period of time and not worry about it. So yeah, it really doesn't break my concentration or anything like that. So that's usually what I'm doing.
See, I feel like I'm the opposite of you. Music is like more background. I don't have to pay attention to it, so I don't like get distracted. Ben, can you write reviews, or how do you write reviews?
I think ideally it would be in silence, but if there's like, as you guys know, because off mic we've talked about this a million times, it seems like every time we try to record a podcast, there's always some chaotic noise happening, like right outside my apartment window that somehow leaks into the mic. So if it gets really loud outside, I'll throw on some music, but for me, it's always like instrumental stuff that I never have to pay attention to the words. I use like the Tron Legacy score sometimes. Mostly it's like the Social Network score. That's like the easiest thing for me to write to. But yeah, for reviews, I feel like, I don't know, reviews to me are like more important than like traditional news articles. So I feel like I have to extra concentrate when I'm writing a review. So yeah, I try to make it as silent as possible just so I can be alone with my thoughts and not have anything creep in there that distracts me in any way.
Yeah, I think the Social Network soundtrack is like
love that.
It's the best soundtrack to work to. It's like made for doing work on a computer.
Yeah.
I know he wasn't asking about how we actually write reviews, but I'm curious to hear what you guys do. Like when I'm in a film festival or I know I'm writing a review of a movie, I usually bring like a pad and I'll write notes during the movie, usually thoughts, lines that occur to me or, observations I have and or ways that I am describing actors' performances or the film in general. And then when I get out and I get to my computer, I take those notes and I kind of type them up and I kind of play Mad Libs for a little while. Like I might try to put a bunch of them into a sentence. Like if I have a bunch of descriptors about a movie, I might put that into a sentence that is like, in the opening of the movie review to kind of get people excited about, if I am excited about the movie, to get people excited about that film. How does it work with you guys? Like, Ben, how do you write reviews? Do you take notes?
Yeah, I bring a notebook with me and take notes when I'm watching stuff. A lot of times it's like specific lines of dialogue, or a lot of times we're seeing stuff that hasn't been released yet and doesn't have like a detailed breakdown on Wikipedia. So sometimes I'll just do like actual plot stuff, like beats and things like that, so I can remember, especially in a film festival setting when you're seeing multiple movies in a day. Yeah, it's more difficult to remember, okay, this happened before this happened, or this led to this, or something like that. So
tell me this. Like, the hardest part of me writing reviews in a film festival setting is to write the plot synopsis. Like, I feel like that is the thing I have the most trouble. I have no trouble at all, vomiting my opinion onto the keyboard, but it's the having to concisely describe what the setup of the film is. That's the trouble I have.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's yeah, I guess everybody's different, because that stuff tends to be pretty easy for me, especially since a lot of that information is already out there in like the film festival program and stuff. And you sort of know going in, like, what's the hook for this movie going to be? And sometimes they hide that information, and sometimes you're able to sort of reforge it in your review without really giving anything away. But that part is generally kind of the easier part for me. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I don't really worry too much about that. I try to keep the plot synopsis as short as possible. Usually use the extended description in the Sundance Guide online for frame of reference, just to make sure that I have, maybe.
Yeah, but those descriptions in the Sundance Guides could be like very abstract.
Not the ones that are actually in the Sundance guide that were written by the people who chose the film for the festival. The much more brief ones are abstract, but the other ones are usually a lot more descriptive. And so I usually use those to inform just the way that I write out the synopsis and recall it. But yeah, I think the more difficult aspect, especially if it's a movie that I really like, is just trying to convey enough of what's great about it to make sure that other people want to see it, because these are movies that are barely going to be on a lot of people's radar when they come out, unless they're surprise hits or indie gems or something like that get picked up by Fox Searchlight or one of those other studios. So I want to make sure that I convey what it is that makes the movie special and why it's good, and really tap into that, and I put some passion into it, and I think that's even when you love a movie, it can be difficult like that, when people barely know anything about a movie and haven't even seen a trailer.
Do you take notes during the screening?
I usually don't, actually. I've never been a notes person when it comes to writing reviews. I'm kind of the mind that anything worth remembering that is important about the movie, I will remember. That I'll take it away when I leave that theater, and write the review. I tend to have a pretty good memory when it comes to details in movies, just because usually when I'm in the theater, I'm in the zone and ready to pay attention and want to absorb every detail. So yeah, I've never been a notes person when it comes to taking them for reference for a review later.
So Ben, what is the hardest part for you in writing a review?
Oh man, yeah, I think it's the balance of trying to, like Brad said, just convey why you like a thing or the important aspects of a thing. The thing that I always try to do in my reviews is get into what the movie is actually about, not plot, but what it's trying to say thematically.
Yeah.
And sometimes for, depending on the movie, that can actually be a really easy thing. I don't know, Ratatouille is about creativity and believing in yourself and whatever, but some movies, and I can't think of one off the top of my head right now, that what you think the actual thematic material underlying the film is a little bit more difficult to tap into, and that is the thing that I always probably spend the most time on, is really sitting there and thinking and trying to find textual examples within the film to back up my claims about what I think the movie is and what it's trying to say. So that's the majority of my work in writing a review is really like taking a step back and looking at it in a macro sense and trying to get a sense of what the thing is, and then going into the micro to justify why I think that.
Yeah, I think some of the worst reviews, and I fall into this sometimes, and I know probably we all fall into this, is when you try to checklist it. And by that I mean, like, okay, here's the plot synopsis paragraph, here's the paragraph about the performances of the actors, here's the the sentence about the writing and the sentence about the score. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you start going down that path, I feel like that's when a review is almost worthless. When you approach it in that way. But sometimes you're at a film festival and you've seen 30 movies and you have to write something. So that's when
it's just easier to fall into that formula when you have when it becomes like so overwhelming, the number of things that you have to review in a day or whatever. But yeah, and then hopefully there's enough in the movie that maybe you can revisit, write about it again later, revisiting it, looking at a specific angle and really dig into that or something. Whether it's in some sort of editorial or like a end of the year feature or something like that, like just highlighting a specific moment or a specific theme that you think comes across really well. So I don't know, for anybody who's just out there writing on their blogs and stuff, I would encourage people to not only just write reviews, but like get into the specifics of stuff too. Like that those kinds of things are really good for creating portfolios that you can send to other websites and stuff. If you're looking for work online, is like, everybody has a review of this movie, but not everybody has approached the movie from a certain angle. Maybe only you have picked something out that stands out to you in that way.
That is very smart. And the other thing I would say to you is go into it asking yourself the question, what is the purpose of this review? Is this a recommendation? Like when we go to film festivals, our reviews are to highlight films that you would never have heard of and get people excited about those films. So you can't go as much into spoilers with those kind of reviews. It's more of giving people a taste. And then we'll have reviews after opening weekend, like we call them spoiler reviews, where we dive into the details and like actually, spend some time wading through all the story points. And I feel like that's a much different review. That's for people who have seen the movie and like the movie or want to understand the movie more. And I feel like you have to decide you have to pick a lane, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. If you have a question for the mailbag, you can send it to peter@slashfilm.com. Please leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention the email on the air. And you can find more of all the stories we've mentioned on today's podcast in the show notes and linked on slashfilm.com. This podcast, Slash Film Daily, is published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please head on over to our iTunes page, give us a 5-star review, tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.